Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 16th and tonight's movie is The Monster. The Monster is a 2016 horror movie directed by Brian Bertino, who is no stranger to Horror Nights. I reviewed two of his other movies, The Dark and the Wicked and The Strangers. Both of those movies took a very common horror movie idea, a home invasion and a haunted house, and presented them in a very stripped down, bare bones way, with a small cast of characters, a limited setting, and a simple story. And The Monster seems to be a similar thing with the concept of running across an unknown dangerous creature. A mother and daughter are driving through, the backwoods in the middle of the night for some reason, and their car, breaks down or crashes, whatever, they're stuck, and nearby is this monster. I wasn't able to get a good look at it in the trailer, but it looked black and goopy and shiny, sort of like a xenomorph. And from what I can tell, the only goal in this movie is for one or both of these two to make it out alive. Both The Strangers and The Dark and the Wicked were very scary. It was very good at developing the atmosphere of its certain subgenre. If I had to guess, I would say that this movie is going to not show us the monster at all, or show it as little as possible. That plays on the principle of nothing that you can see can be as scary as what you would imagine. I'm going to give this movie a watch and let you know what I think. I am pleasantly surprised. The Monster was my favorite of the three Brian Bertino movies I've watched. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. With how simple and bare bones these movies are in concept, the execution will make or break the movie. And the execution was pretty much flawless throughout this movie. At the very center of this movie, the core of The Monster, is the relationship between the two main characters, Kathy and her daughter, Lizzie. The two actors who played them, Zoe Kazan and Ella Ballantine, they both did amazing with their performances. I will say that Lizzie was a lot older than I was expecting her to be, and Kathy looked a lot younger than I was expecting her to be. When I saw the premise of this movie, I kind of assumed it was a mother and daughter who just in general didn't really get along. Maybe the mom is too busy for her or something like that, but no, that is not the case. There is no other way to put this. Kathy is a terrible mother. She's abusive, she's neglectful, she's unreliable, she's a severe alcoholic. Well, I wouldn't exactly call her a villain, she is an anti-hero at best. Lizzie was a lot more like a typical horror movie protagonist. She was smart and mature for her age. That kind of comes with the territory when you have to grow up too fast, but she was also still very much a kid. She's stubborn, she's emotional, she's defiant. And it's very clear, these two do not normally get along, but when all the chips are down and when their lives are in danger, they are able to put that all aside and work together and want to help each other. I was curious as to how much of the monster we were going to see, and while we certainly don't get a high-def close-up look at it, we do get a pretty good view of the monster at a few points, but that only starts, right at the beginning of the third act of the movie. I think, Jaws set the precedent that, you only reveal the monster at, the end of the second act. And the design of this monster is nothing to write home about. It's just, the shape of Godzilla, but the size of 10 feet and the texture of a xenomorph. Before the big reveal, they mostly did distant shots or in shadows or POV. And very much in line with the other Brian Bertino movies, we know nothing about this thing. We don't know what it is, we don't know where it came from, how long it's been in these forests. We know nothing about the monster because that's not really what's important. One thing I will 100% give this movie is that the practical effects they used for the monster were amazing. I really feel like practical effects should be used more for stuff like this because there is no CG that will look as real as something that is actually there. There were a few shots in this movie that were too dark, but that has been the case for all Brian Bertino movies I've seen, and there was a lot less of that here than there was in something like The Strangers. I couldn't really have any fun with this movie, but, from a technical standpoint, this was wonderfully executed. It had good scares, good suspense, good drama. There weren't really any surprises in the story, though, but its core is done very well. If you liked Brian Bertino's other movies, I think you would like this too. And now I want to talk about some spoilers in this movie. The first big scene involving the monster is the car like has a tire blowout and they can't go anywhere, so they get like a tow truck to come in, and the tow truck operator is like working like underneath the car. And there's a point where like they suddenly just like stop hearing the mechanic. As big as this monster is, it's fast and pretty quiet. And then an arm just flies in out of nowhere and lands on the hood of the car. And later, when Kathy and Lizzie are cowering in the car, the man that arm used to be attached to is crawling back as like this bloody, mauled carcass trying to get in the car, and then he gets dragged under his own truck, and I guess we can only assume what is being done to him by his screams. An ambulance comes with 2 EMTs, and it's very much the same. Like, they were able to get the mother and daughter into the ambulance, but they both also get killed by the monster. And while Kathy is trying to drive away, the monster just flies into the side of the ambulance and, like, knocks it into a ditch. Now, the monster had already severely injured Kathy before this, but with the crash, she doesn't have much time left. So she makes a plan where the last thing she's going to do is serve as bait for the monster so that Lizzie can escape. And considering the fact that she was dying anyway, this isn't the most noble of sacrifices, but it is a character moment for her. But it was ultimately for nothing because Lizzie didn't even escape. So then Lizzie is actually able to kill the monster by lighting it on fire. Several times through the movie, you saw her playing with the lighter that her mother uses to light cigarettes, just lighting it, closing it, lighting it, closing it. And she takes that and an aerosol spray can from the ambulance to basically just light the whole monster on fire, and it burns itself out. But then the one bad thing in this movie happens. This one part is straight up just bad. The monster is burned out, it's lying on the ground, it's not moving, and instead of getting the hell out of there, Lizzie just slowly walks up to the monster. So, of course, the monster wakes back up again and roars, and then Lizzie just beats it with a stick until it dies. So, there was no point to that besides a cheap jump scare. That one part is the only occasion where I will legitimately dock points from this movie. Like, there was no good reason to do that. But the movie ends with a flashback to, I don't even know when this was, but it was a point in the past where I guess this was after a big argument or incident between the two of them, but it's Kathy going to Lizzie and telling her that she does love her and she knows that she will go on to do big things one day and be a better person than she ever could be. And I think that sort of contributes to the ultimate takeaway when it comes to Kathy's character. She is not a good mother. She's not even really a good person, but she's not a monster. She's not evil. And when faced with an actual monster, something actually evil, she was able to do the right thing. So she is a profoundly flawed person, but still a person. And the last shot of the movie is Lizzie leaving the woods and going out into a field, now safe. Out of the 3 Brian Bertino movies I've watched, this one was the most character-oriented. In The Dark and the Wicked and The Strangers, it felt more like the characters were being used to further the plot. In this one, it felt more like the plot was being used to further the dynamic between the 2 leads. And despite some hiccups here and there, I thought it was executed very well. I would recommend it. And with that, we are more than halfway done with Horror Nights. I was actually kind of nervous because 1 year ago today, I watched The Mist, which is among the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. But thankfully, Horror Night Hump Day didn't do me dirty for 2 years in a row. I'll see you tomorrow with another movie.